the shadow knows.
Alright, here's something you have to know about me. I am not a horror movie fan. I am an absolute pussy when it comes to this sort of thing. I'm also not an expert on David Lynch, or an expert on strange indie movies. I wouldn't call myself an expert on movie analysis. This is really my first time trying it, to be honest. I did some games, did some anime, did some music. Now I'm going to attempt to do a movie. This will not be the most nuanced take on this movie. This will not be the most insightful or informative video made about this movie. I'm just here to make the case for why you should check out Eraserhead. I should probably start with why I decided to check it out, although truth be told I really don't know. I just sort of did it. I had heard of the movie. I knew one of my friends liked it. I knew who David Lynch is from fucking Louie.
Go! Funny!
And Red Letter Media made the movie sound interesting as fuck. I'm not a film buff by any stretch of the imagination, but I enjoy myself a good movie. And ultimately, I figured if I was gonna pop my horror cherry, I might as well pick the freakiest thing I could think of, which wouldn't be some shitty generic garbage with tons of jump scares. It would be a nightmarish slow burn, something that would congeal in my head after the credits began to roll. For as intimidating as Eraserhead seemed and was, I ended up getting through it alright. And the movie has quickly become one of my favorite things I've ever watched. It's joined my epic wall of things I own and would like to review at some point. Now I'd like to share my experience of Eraserhead with you. I wasn't sure how I was going to approach this topic. One thing I knew that I wasn't really interested in is meticulously breaking down every potential hidden meaning of the movie. If you ask me, nothing is more boring than some fucking ugly tranny just explaining the movie to you. I'd rather give you a framework to view the movie through, so you can better inform your own interpretation of the movie. However, in all honesty, that might not even be necessary. I think the movie adequately does this on its own. Eraserhead is a very strange, abstract movie with tons of bizarre visuals. Eraserhead is fucking weird. You will likely be very confused after your first viewing. It would honestly be really strange if you weren't. However, for all of the movie's insane moments, there is a fairly sturdy thematic stem that all of the movie's events are rooted in. That theme, at least according to my reading of the movie, is the anxieties coupled with becoming a new parent. More broadly, it could be interpreted as the fear of the responsibility one must assume in adulthood. The inability to pursue your own selfish interests in good conscience. To put it as bluntly as possible, if you're a good person, you can't put your desires before your children's needs. This theme is consistently on display throughout the entire movie. It's our anchor to the story, of which the basic premise is also actually pretty straightforward. Henry Spencer accidentally impregnates his girlfriend Mary, who gives birth to a disgusting monster baby. Mary eventually leaves him, and poor Henry is left alone to take care of his horribly deformed child. He is visited by all sorts of strange characters along the way. The details are a bit tricky, but once you've digested the premise and understand the theme of the movie, it's not too difficult to understand what means what and how it relates to that theme. So long as you can sort of get the idea, you're good. David Lynch has claimed that Eraserhead is his most spiritual film. The movie has been described as being very dreamlike. Dream sequences in movies allow the film's story to break free from the shackles of the logic the rest of the story is embedded in. Where Eraserhead becomes confusing is its refusal to tell you what is and is not part of a dream. The movie setting, for instance, is a post-apocalyptic industrial wasteland. Is this truly where the events of the movie take place? Or is this an exaggerated view of how our clueless protagonist views the world, which is hostile and uninviting to him? Did his girlfriend honestly give birth to this hideous creature, or is this just another exaggerated way of how Henry views his child, a disgusting, crying nuisance? The reluctance to give away too much extends beyond the movie itself. To the frustration of some and the admiration of others, David Lynch has almost completely refused to give away any details of the movie's plot.
Would you like to expound on that a little? No.
As for how I feel about that, I fall into the latter category. There has been no authoritative statement as to what the point of Eraserhead is. It means that any interpretation of the movie's plot might as well be correct. The movie is a massive puzzle with no one-size-fits-all solution. It can't not be incredibly intriguing. It also heightens the already otherworldly quality of the film, in my opinion. The film's qualities almost precede itself. It just popped out of David Lynch's head and appeared on film, and we don't know what it means. We also don't know how it got there, as David Lynch has also been secretive about many aspects of the film's production. For instance, the horrifying baby. They have never revealed how the baby was made. It might be the most amazing practical effect ever, and we don't know where it came from. It's fascinating, especially because of how painfully close this movie came to not ever being made. To call Eraserhead's production cycle difficult would be a tremendous understatement. The making of this movie was so arduous that it took over 5 years to be completed on a puny budget.
I'll just subtract it from today's profit. And there's no money in here!
That figure likely isn't even accurate to what the film honestly took to make. Lynch kept running out of money and had to survive off the generosity of his staff. An extreme degree of generosity, in fact, as the movie wasn't expected to make any money. They knew that from the very beginning. The movie was eventually completed and released as a sort of midnight movie, the first of its kind. The first screening was fairly successful, and it got distributed more and more over the coming years. By itself, Eraserhead was not a huge success, but it did successfully pave the way for David Lynch's career as a director. For example, Mel Brooks eventually saw the movie and loved it so much that he agreed to let Lynch direct The Elephant Man. Stanley Kubrick called Eraserhead his favorite film, and later showed the film to the cast of The Shining during its production to, quote, get them in the mood. George Lucas even liked the film and wanted David Lynch to direct Return of the Jedi, which Lynch turned down because it gave him a headache. Seriously. He was truly ahead of his time on that one. The film has accrued an amazing legacy over the years, and David Lynch would use the money he made later in his career to pay back the staff of Eraserhead for their contributions. For as incredibly bleak as the world of the movie is, the story of its eventual success and legacy is honestly one of the most wholesome things in the universe. Before we actually address the film, a few fun facts about the film's production. Jack Nance, who played Henry, kept that ridiculous haircut for the full 5 years it took to film the movie. So basically the entire former half of the 1970s. Certain shots being placed seconds apart in the movie, such as Henry entering and exiting through a door, were actually shot a full year apart. There were quite a few cutscenes from the film as well, about which very little is known. The credits list quite a few characters that never make any appearance in the film, such as people digging in the alley, landlady, or man with cigar. One of the cutscenes was never even filmed, a scene where a nurse would give Henry and Mary their baby. In the final movie, it just sort of shows up, which in my opinion is way more effective. Getting into the actual movie now, possibly the most incredible aspect of Eraserhead is its legendary sound design. David Lynch and sound designer Alan Splett spent about a year on the sound effects alone. The movie features these vast soundscapes which vary wildly in intensity. Almost every scene in the movie is accompanied by howling wind or heavy machinery or overwhelming room noise or anything really. There are very few lines of dialogue in Eraserhead and even fewer instances of silence. One of my favorite motifs is the presence of some Fats Waller songs from the late 1920s, which play faintly in the background of certain outdoor scenes. The atmosphere of this movie is fantastic, and also seriously impressive given its budget. My favorite shots of the movie would definitely have to be those of Henry walking to Mary's house. That eerie sound mixed with Henry clumsily wandering around this dark, contrasty environment. The composition of shots is definitely one of Eraserhead's greatest defining characteristics. For as random as the movie seems, it still comes off as being very deliberate. There's a purpose to every movement of the camera. I think it's also something that makes the scares of the movie so effective. I called Eraserhead a horror movie earlier, but that may not be an accurate title. At the very least, it absolutely shouldn't be classified alongside more conventional horror movies. Nobody really knows what the point of the movie is, but to me, scares definitely don't seem to be a part of it. There's only really one jump scare in the entire movie, and it's not even the scariest thing in the movie. This movie proves quite definitively in my eyes that the anticipation of a scare is in some ways worse than the actual scare itself. I remember, prior to watching Eraserhead, listening to my friend Liam, yes, that Liam, talk about how jump scares are often used incorrectly, and genuine horror is something that you're left to digest after the movie ends. I didn't say anything, but I kinda rolled my eyes and thought, yeah, okay, sure, Mr. Movie Expert, whatever you say.
No.
That anticipation is used to heighten tension, and the movie does this brilliantly. Long, drawn-out shots that hold on pure black, or a character's face, or something seemingly insignificant. Not only does the movie do this for dramatic effect, it does this for comedic effect as well. For instance, these elevator doors, which are funnier than any of the zany quips from these shitty fucking Marvel movies. Eraserhead honestly surprised me with its sense of humor. Horror and comedy are not things that normally go together in my mind, but I think Eraserhead proves that the two work exceptionally well together. The dinner scene is the best example of that, which is really fucking scary, but also retarded and hilarious at the same time. There's no way I can make any sense of it, you'll just have to watch it yourself to get where I'm going with this. I can at least say that I think Henry, portrayed flawlessly by Jack Nance, embodies this horror-comedy schism perfectly. He just looks so clueless in every scene. He never fully understands what's going on, which in a paradoxical way sort of shows just how well Jack Nance understands the context of these scenes. I think he fulfills the role of the audience surrogate for most, but not all of the movie. For example, there's a scene where he comes home and sees his wife and grotesque child monster and gives this awkward smile. One of the only times a character ever smiles in the whole movie. There are some scenes in this movie that are absolutely fucking depressing, like the entire sequence of Mary leaving Henry. Shit is fucking sad. The scenes of Henry being holed up in his apartment are both incredibly anxiety-inducing and also just evoke this amazingly hopeless, lonely feeling that's fucking upsetting, and I want to stop talking about it now. Anyway, I think the scene with Henry smiling is supposed to indicate just how desperate Henry is for companionship, but even then, I'm not all that sure. After all, you can't ever be too sure with Eraserhead. There's so much more that can be said about this movie. I haven't gone anywhere near the ending, for instance, for which so much can be said. People have been breaking this movie down for decades, and I don't think we're any closer to solving the mystery of what the hell David Lynch was thinking when he made this movie. Ultimately, I think you've just got to experience the movie yourself. I thought that this movie looked too scary and weird and that I would regret having seen it and never watch it or anything like it ever again, but I watched it and I loved it. Enough that I've seen it like 5 separate times, and it's quickly become one of my favorite things I've ever watched. I really couldn't recommend this one enough. Beneath all the weird symbolism, there's a pretty emotionally resonant story, and a pretty depressing one at that. However, for as bleak as the movie might be, I think the story of its legacy is very optimistic. There's absolutely no way that this movie was made to profit. You could not sell this movie even today if you tried, let alone in the late 70s. This movie was made to satisfy its creator and no one else. It exists purely out of the passion people had for this strange little project. In spite of all that, those that gave a shit were properly repaid for their efforts, and many of them saw success beyond the bounds of Eraserhead. And I think that makes for a very nice little end-of-video story. I hope you enjoyed this weird little detour into Eraserhead, and I hope this video inspires you to watch the movie, or at the very least learn a little more about the movie. I definitely say it's worth it. If you've already seen the movie, it's definitely deserving of a rewatch. Lots of little details you'll likely notice on your second viewing. There were some that took me quite a while to notice. Plus, in a world where there's an excess of shitty 2-hour-long advertisements designed to farm as much money as possible, it's nice to see a movie that's just honestly about what it's about. Anyways, I hope you enjoy, and here's a meme.
3, 2, 1.
Gotta blow!
Oh, you are sick.
So Eraserhead really it represents the anxiety.